Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Gentreo podcast. As always, I am your host, Jacob Murphy, and joining me today is Susan Frigoletto. She's a mom, a foster mom, a practicing attorney whose passion is foster kids and advocating for them. She has 8 years of experience fostering and lives in Wellesley, Mass. with her 3 daughters, 12 chickens, and a golden retriever. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for our guests, why don't you introduce yourself in a little more detail and let us get to know you a little better?
Okay, well, I'm Susan Frigoletto, as mentioned earlier, and my passion is foster kids, really wanting to make a difference and do something very hands-on. When I was growing up, my parents, we took in someone in foster care, and he lived with us for 7 years. My parents ended up sending him on to college, and we still are in touch with him. He's become a very productive man, a business owner, a great dad to 4 kids. And it was something I always knew there would be a time in my life when I'd want to do exactly the same thing that my parents had done. And my dad passed away. I was going through a divorce, and I decided that it was the perfect time. It was another fun person to love and nurture in our house, and something to change our perspective on what was going on in the house. And that's exactly what we did.
Mm-hmm. So you knew from a pretty early age that fostering was going to be a part of your life.
I definitely did. Yes.
Okay. Is there, did you pick up on it pretty quickly? Like, I feel like a lot of people may think of fostering as kind of a black box where because they haven't had the experience, they may not know much about it. Did you learn pretty much all there is to know through that experience earlier in life?
Well, yes, I did. And interestingly enough, my parents took teenagers, and I haven't, at this point in time, jumped into the teenage world, primarily because I have teenagers. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think we needed a 4th in the house. But that being said, having a baby was a great opportunity to be super grounded, have to be home every night, and really concentrate on my own children while nurturing another baby or 2 or a toddler through the foster system. I didn't learn everything that I needed to know, because obviously being a foster sibling is very different than being a foster parent, but there's nothing like on-the-job training, and nothing like on-the-job training being a parent to train you for being a foster parent, because I think you just know what to expect and what you can't control and what you never expect, but sometimes it happens.
And so you foster, what's like the age range, infants through toddlers?
So I've taken babies right out of the hospital, 2 days of age, and had a little girl from my own community who was 9 years of age when she came into care. But my primary assignments have been for newborns, drug-addicted newborns. That's who I've welcomed into my house.
And what is that experience like? I imagine that taking in a foster child of that age is already a pretty drastic experience, much less one that you said addicted, correct?
Yeah, I think taking drug addicted babies was really my sort of call to action at the time that I became a foster parent, because that was where the real need was. And at first it's pretty scary, because you go in and meet the babies in the intensive care unit in the hospital, and they're little, they're really sick, they're hooked up to tons of monitors. But what they really need is just TLC. And I remember saying, I have no medical training. Are you sure I can do this? And it's a little scary at first, the shakes and all of the symptoms that go on with someone being born addicted, because it lasts for about 4 months. Loving them just like I've loved every other newborn that's come in, including my own, and attaching them to me and getting them on a schedule is really the best care that they can have. And I think it delivers great results.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that must be like, because being born drug addicted, I imagine the first step of your life is essentially a detox.
It is. It is. And it's 5 weeks of detox.
And for our audience listening, Susan's actually currently with one of her foster kids. So we have can I ask the name of the child you have right now?
This is Delilah, and she is 3 months old, almost 3 months old. Her nap schedule is not coordinating with our podcast.
So we're
just rolling with it.
Well, then our Gentreo audience has the pleasure of having two guests on today. So we have
There you
Susan
go.
and we have Delilah. So welcome to Delilah to the show as well. So what's the on the other side of um the foster care coin, I suppose? So what is it like towards the end of when you're giving care for these children, and what's the process like once they're ready to move on?
Love this question. I think it's my favorite question you're going to ask because
Hmm.
it's really hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard. I've introduced a lot of loss into my family because, as you can imagine, when someone is a member of your family for whatever period of time it is, you come to love them. And so the thought of them leaving and going somewhere else and someone else nurturing them is really a hard pill to swallow.
Hmm.
But we very much have decided that this is our role, is to help families that can't have children. And babies don't go to adoptive homes until they're legally free for adoption. And
Hmm.
for really almost the first 9 months to a year, while a baby's in foster care, they are not legally free for adoption. Their goal is automatically reunification with their family. So they're providing lots of services to family, lots of support, and doing weekly visits to try to keep that bond in place. And it's only around the 9-month mark where the goal would change from reunification to adoption. And so we've had someone that came to us at 9 months and left at 4 years of age, and the loss was huge.
Yeah.
We still have pictures all over our house and think about that little boy every day. But so in some situations, we haven't had loss because our relationship with the family during that transition from our house to their house was so meaningful that we've stayed in touch, and we've loved that. So there's 2 little girls. One of them is 4 and one of them is almost 3. Each of them spent quite a bit of time in our house. In fact, the 2-year-old spent her whole life in our house, and the 4-year-old had spent the first 6 months of her life at our house. And we have a relationship with them to this day and go to birthday parties. We're invited to the official adoption day parties. And so that balances out the stories where the adoptive families have decided that they don't want to have a relationship with us.
Okay. And for the situations where, like you said, the main goal is for reuniting the child with their
Yep.
biological parent.
Yep.
Is that, and you said your specialty was taking in drug addicted infants. Is that time range typically to allow the parent to get help and recover as well, and then reunite the family?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter if you're born drug addicted or mom is unable to care for you because she's incarcerated or has other mental health challenges. New babies, always the goal is reunification. And DCF's mission is really to provide services for the family in the hopes that the family unit can stay together. That's always their first goal. And so really the system is set up for parents to be able to put their best foot forward, and they give them an adequate amount of time to do it before they terminate the family unit.
Okay. And so it sounds like, and I might be misinterpreting this, but it sounds like there's almost different types of foster parenting that one can get into. In your case, it's much younger children, and then like you said, with the goal of hopefully reuniting them with their biological families. But if not, and then they move on to their next stage, are there foster parents who are then more geared towards that kind of older infant to young teens age range? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So I'm licensed for up to 6, but I think that would not stop me from being able to take someone that was 9 or 10 years old.
So there's licenses for age ranges?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes. But most of the reality is there's just not enough unrestricted homes, which means non-family member homes for teens to go live in. So many of the teens end up being placed in group homes. And that's so sad for those children if I could say anything, making a plea and having an audience, it's that, and this is what I will do when my own teens are out of the house, is teenagers need to have a loving, stable environment, just like a newborn baby does, really. And we need so many more homes to take care of teens that are having mental health struggles and beyond. The kids that get to stay in a family member home are probably the kids that do the best. That's always the first goal, is to find a family member that can take care of the child. And then the second choice is someone like me, which is a non-family member home. And sometimes there are specialized non-family member homes, meaning that if a child has special or complex medical needs or mental health needs, they go into a provider that has more training than I do in that arena. But the other,
and is that one of the? I would imagine that's probably one of the main issues that this, I guess you could call it an industry faces. Is it that lack of providers, the lack of just access to people who can provide this type of care?
Yes, probably. I mean, that's definitely not my area of expertise, but I know when I'm recruiting and helping to find other people, they're always saying we're looking for teen homes. That seems to be DCF's big hole, is that a lot of people aren't brave enough to step forward and take the teens. Teens often end up in group homes. And well, actually, I'd like to say,
the phrase, group homes. Can you explain what group homes are in a little more detail, just for our audience who may not know?
Yes. So group homes are where there's resident supervisors, and there may be 7 or 8 bedrooms. There also may be one foster mom that's equipped to do this, and say she has 5 or 6 homes and takes in 5 or 6 teens at a time. It's just a less specialized program, meaning like I'm one person and I have one baby. So these adults may not be consistent or may be consistent, but either way, they're supervising a number of children. And it's much less a nurturing system than it is sort of a housing system. And, I, as a mom of 3 young daughters ranging in age from 17 to 21, I mean, this is still a population that needs a lot of TLC and handholding. Young adulthood is really hard. And I think they need someone on them all the time. And I'm not sure that that happens so much in a group home.
Yeah. And I imagine, again, not to say that all group homes are the worst place to end up, but I imagine it comes down to, again, that lack of resources. And it's not that the care doesn't want to be provided, but sometimes it just can't be because of that lack of resources. Is that accurate to say?
It is. And also further, bigger kids have bigger problems. And many of these kids have had very traumatic events in their life, and they're not actually, they're not easy kids to take care of either. So they're kids that require a lot of services, and kids that have suffered a lot of loss, trauma. And this further complicates finding them, the perfect living situation.
So to transition a little bit, as you know, Gentreo is our primary focus is on estate planning and how we can help families, individuals protect legacy and protect themselves and their wishes. With your experience in the foster industry, where do you see an intersect between that estate planning world and the foster care system?
Such an interesting point. So there is a huge intersection, and I wish I could outline this better. But I guess I would say that, just because a child has had a parent pass away, so you have a parent that passes away and there's no family member that can take care of you, you may get adopted. You may go up for adoption and get adopted. I don't think that should make you necessarily unable to to inherit your parents' Social Security or your parents' estate or your grandparents' estate, for that matter. Just because someone can't take care of you, it doesn't mean you should be omitted from all of those things. And Gentreo just may be a great platform to be able to deliver that, to protect the kids for whom that applies.
And because, we have the everything we do is brought the estate planning world into the 21st century. It's all digital and online. I imagine that
Yeah,
would be
absolutely. It can't be
beneficial for
lost.
allowing these things to follow. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of all these things, and it can lead to these types of problems. Have you experienced that in your own foster care experiences?
Well, just once in all of my cases did I have a little girl whose parents passed away. And DCF would, sometimes ask if you need anything. She's got a big account because she's basically collecting her father's Social Security. Sometime after that happened, that was about a year ago, Massachusetts decided to change the legislation so that that money could accumulate in accounts for that child instead of being used to offset expenses that it didn't necessarily need to offset. So those accounts or the legal actions that were pending, like this dad had a wrongful death case pending, and the child that I had of his in foster care stood to inherit quite a bit of money from his wrongful death action. All of those legal documents would need to be kept in a place because she would have to have a trustee appointed. Obviously, a 2-year-old is probably going to have to wait till they're 25 to 18 to 25 to 35 to access some of those funds. But the only way that could be available for family members, for adoptive parents, and for the child to know where all of those documents were would be to have one easy digital point of access.
Is it typically legal documents, though, that struggle to be accessible to these children, or are there other important documents that you tend to find there's
I don't think there are other important documents in the case of foster children. I think that the example I gave you of the child with the lawsuit pending and having rights to that estate, I think that's probably the extent of what would happen for a foster child, because when they're coming into foster care, if they're going back to their own family, then their own family would, take on the responsibility for all of that. If they're going to another family and they're going to be adopted permanently, typically adoption is permanent, final adjudication. And so they have a new family. But there are things like lawsuits and their rights to that estate that could transcend that. And I think the only way to do it would be to have an online digital repository for that information.
I'm just thinking, once the child is adopted to a permanent home, I'm wondering if there's any, say a child gets adopted and the parents, add that child to their will.
Yep.
I wonder if there's any need to have like other documents from that child's previous foster home that would be required to be presented in some case like that. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that either.
I'll ask some of our estate planning lawyers.
But I really think most of that in most cases would really just involve that new family adding that child to their estate planning documents, and the process would start all over with the new family.
And so for the just to get back to that example you gave for that one child, what did that process look like for that child to go through? I can't imagine it being an easy process to have to deal with.
This process for this little girl that I'm talking about
it's still going.
Is still in the process of settling. Okay. So she was one of 4 siblings from dad, and she went home to be with her dad. Dad was killed. She came back into care. I had her before her placement back with her dad, and then I had her after. And dad was hit by a car and killed. And so his 4 siblings each had a claim to this action of wrongful death by the person that hit him in the car. Because she was the only one that was under the age of 18 and well under the age of 18, she had the biggest claim because she was missing him during her formative years. And when the judge learned of that, he appointed an attorney just to look after her financial interests. And so that's the first time this has happened to me. But obviously there's many cases across the country. So the judge appointed an attorney just to look out for her trust, and all of those documents need to be kept somewhere, eventually shared with the family that legally adopts her. And then they have to allow her to know about that as she grows up. That's a trust she'll have access to. They usually stagger the access. So she may have access to some of it at 18, some of it at 25, and some at 35 or something like that.
And now this is kind of a question just out of my own curiosity, but I imagine when you're going through the process of taking in a new child, there's probably some sort of, there's a process, there's probably some sort of paperwork to go through. Is it as simple as you are named the child's guardian?
So each state has a Department of Children and Families, and it's the Department of Children and Families that gets custody of the children that are in foster care. And then they are in the custody of the foster parents, but only physically, not legally. And so I am in charge of taking the children to doctor's appointments, regularly scheduled activities, dentist, whatever it may be. But if there's something more significant, sign off is required from the social worker in charge of the child. If there's tubes or an ear surgery or probably wisdom teeth removed or something like that, it does require sign off from the legal authority that's in charge of the child.
As you can tell, I feel like a lot of listeners could probably relate to this because it is kind of I feel like it's an area that unless you're truly involved in it, such as you are, you may not know much about. So if people are interested in learning more, are there like really good resources out there or a good source for learning about this?
Well, every state is always trying to recruit foster parents. It's definitely the cheapest, best way to house young children is in the family, in a family, if they're not in their own family setting, in another family setting. So each state probably has their own set of information available on the Department of Children and Families websites. In Massachusetts, we also host information sessions monthly for families that are interested in becoming foster parents. And I'm on many of them as other foster parent ambassadors in the state volunteer, because that's really what foster parents, it's the best use for recruiting, because people want to ask parents what they think of it, what the impact's been on their children, how the kids feel about it, what are the hiccups. And so each state sort of handles it differently, but probably substantially similarly.
What advice would you give to, someone who was to come up to you and say that they're interested in becoming a foster parent? What would be a good piece of advice you'd want to leave them with?
Well, I would say it's been one of the best, most meaningful experiences in my life, and probably in my children's life as well. My oldest daughter is studying to be a therapist to help foster children in transition, because it's something that we've all really seen a need for. It doesn't mean it's not a lot of sacrifice, because it is, but 100% well worth it. And when people see us nurturing the babies that stay with us, they say those babies are so lucky. And I truly believe we are the lucky ones that get to care for them and help get them a very positive start to life in what otherwise would be not such a great situation.
Yeah, I can only imagine that, I'm sure that life comes with a whole assortment of hardships, but I don't find it hard to imagine that the benefits and the blessings of having these children in your life is well worth it.
It totally is.
Well, Susan, I really do appreciate you coming on. I'm interested in actually learning more about the foster industry, because kind of like estate planning, I feel like it's a bit of a black box to some people, and it comes across as a misunderstood industry, but I would be interested in learning more about it. But thank you very much for coming on today. I hope our audience was able to learn a little something about an aspect of life that some people, not everyone gets to experience. But I really appreciate you coming on and giving us some insight.
Well, thank you so much for having me.